Ever since I was a wee little strip of bacon, I dreamed of one thing. And that one thing is mental telepathy. And I'm not talking about superhero falls into pit of radioactive goo mental telepathy. I'm talking about legitimate mental telepathy. I can control things with my mind. Well, I can now. Let me control something with my mind for you. And now I'll prove it to you by changing the video channel on the HDZero transmitter of this quad with just my mind. I have to concentrate. And there we are. We went from race 1 to race 8 with the power of a grease-filled brain. Isn't that just the most amazing mental telepathy thing you've ever seen happen? It shouldn't be, because it's a freaking lie. I did it with these. Hey everybody, I'm Bacon Ninja, and today we will be taking a look at the HDZero Goggles backpack feature. ExpressLRS backpack feature, to be totally precise. And if you don't know what the ExpressLRS backpack is, it is the ability for your ExpressLRS module in your ExpressLRS compatible radio, equipped with module, internal, whatever it may be, that has been made within the last year or so when backpack has been supported by these devices. It has a capability to have a secondary connection other than to your quad. You know about the connection to your quad with ExpressLRS, but there's a whole other ESP32 chip in there doing a secondary connection to things like these goggles, because the HDZero goggles have a secondary ESP32 chip on board that you can program to act as a ELRS backpack. And the ELRS backpack gives you the option to change your video band and channel on the quad from your radio while simultaneously changing the band and channel in your goggles. You can also do a couple other things like change your power output modes and start and stop recording with a switch on your radio, all natively baked into ExpressLRS. And today we're going to dive into how that works. And you've seen it work because that's what I did for my mental telepathy thing, which had nothing to do with telepathy and more to do with the fact that I'm just some kind of mental. But really, back to the first thing I said about not falling into a pit of radioactive ooze and becoming a superhero. I lied. I really do want to fall into a pit of radioactive ooze and become a superhero, especially if it comes with real mental telepathy powers, unlike, the things I'm doing with radios that have nothing to do with my bacon brain. Now let's back this train up for a second, because there are a couple of prerequisites if you actually want to do this. First prerequisite, you must have in your greasy little hands an actual pair of HDZero goggles. And I'm sure a lot of you out there are crying right now because you have yet to get your shipping notices, because they're trying to make as many of these things as they can. They're super popular and you're having to wait on them, but you have to actually have the goggles in your hands. This is not something you can prep for as far as the goggles go. You can, however, prep your quads and your radios to be compatible with this and just do all the goggle steps when your goggles eventually show up and you've suddenly stopped giving up on everything you hold dear in your life because your goggles are taking forever to come to you and you're crying every day in your closet, probably in the fetal position, something like that. But we won't tell anybody because that's perfectly normal. Everybody feels that way when it comes to the HDZero goggles right now. So yeah, it's all right. Don't worry about it. But the first prereq is that you must have goggles. You must also have a ELRS module or internal module, depending on the radio you're running, that has the backpack functionality. And I will try to find a list of what is actually compatible with the backpack for ELRS, because some of the older ELRS modules, like the Happy model before the Pro version, didn't actually have the extra chip on board to accomplish the backpack. So not everything has it, but most of the modern ELRS hardware has it. The ones that are built into the radios have it for sure. And as you can see, I'm running the full-size Radio Master Ranger module. All the Ranger series modules have backpack. So does the Happy Model Pro series, which I ran previously. I believe the Namimo and a lot of the betas do too. So most hardware that's made in the last year has the backpack chip built in, but check your spec page, or if there is a link in the description below to a page of viable backpack hardware, check that as well. But the last prerequisite is on your quads, because in order to make this work, you don't have to flash anything special to your quad. It uses the same devices that the flight controller would to change the VTX. So I'm talking about smart audio and MSP VTX control if you're running Betaflight 4.4. And for this and the one you saw at the very beginning, I am running MSP VTX control because it is the most awesome way to control your HDZero VTXs without having to actually use a second UART for smart audio. And if you're interested in how I did that, I do have a video on my channel. If you go back a little ways, don't skip to it right now. Just watch this one because it matters to me if you complete this video. If you don't complete this video, I will cry. But I'll also link that video on how to get MSP VTX control enabled in the description below. It's a little bit dated now because 4.4 did actually release, and I did it prior when it was still in release candidate. Yeah, that's the word we use for it. I did it when that was happening, so it's a little dated, but it still applies. But you will need smart audio or MSP VTX control enabled on your quad. Nothing fancy, right? Nothing fancy at all. Well, there's one downside to doing this, and the downside to doing it is the firmware itself. As far as the HDZero Goggle firmware, not too big of a deal, honestly. The actual firmware on the goggles is kept at a GitHub page. And at this GitHub page, you want to go to Releases over here on the right side and make sure you're running at least version 8.0.0 because this is when they implemented some fixes for the backpack. If you read some of the release notes, fix ELRS backpack recording while in the menu. So since, like I said before, you have to actually have your goggles in your hand to accomplish this, that's just common sense, right? Yeah, go ahead and flash to at least the version 8.0.0. I'd recommend whatever the newest version is, to be honest with you. And if you're not familiar with that flashing process, it's actually pretty friggin' straightforward. You just download the file, there's a bin in there, you drop it on the root of your SD card, you pop the old SD card into your goggles, you go to firmware, and you hit Update Goggles Firmware. It's pretty simple, and it takes, like, I don't know, 10 minutes. It's not a big deal. So get your stuff flashed up to that. Now, when it comes to the ELRS backpack firmware, and yes, I did say ELRS backpack firmware, it's a whole separate set of firmware for the ELRS backpack. Normally, what we do when we're building ExpressLRS firmware is go into the ELRS configurator. And on the left side of configurator, there's a whole section dedicated to backpack, and they are on version 1.2.0 backpack. So let's check out what the targets have in it. If we pull down the category, we do have goggles in the category, but you'll notice the only thing listed is the Orca FPV Connect backpack. And that's because, as far as I can tell, the ELRS configurator does not yet build the firmware for the HDZero goggles. You can build this firmware for the HDZero VRX if you want to slap an ESP32 on it, or like a Happy Model board that you can slap on it. I've actually done that, and I have a video on how to do that, again, on my channel from a long time back before my videos looked as pretty as they do now, and it's a little bit embarrassing, so I think you should go watch it and see why I don't do videos that way anymore. They look really funny, and I'm terrified of them. But I'll link that one in the description below too if you're still running the VRX, but this is specifically for the HDZero goggles. That's the whole point of this video, is to get that feature enabled. But you can't build it in the ELRS configurator. So luckily, someone has given us this firmware. Thank you to the someone for giving us this firmware, because the only way we can get it to work is with these packages. Because in this handy Google Doc that I have linked below, there is a link to the drive file where you can pick up this firmware. There it is, elrs.zip. So you'll want to go ahead and download this zip file and put it somewhere for safekeeping. As you can see, I've already downloaded mine to a folder called HDZero Goggle. And the first thing we're going to do is use that there firmware. But the first thing we're going to do is format the SD card in our goggles. Because if you don't know this about the way goggles work, the SD card in there actually gets a little more corrupt every time you power off the goggles, if you didn't know, and over time things get funny. So let's not take any chances by using a card that may have some corruption in it, even though it continues to work, while flashing things. Let's go ahead and get the card formatted in our goggles, then I'll show you how to put the firmware onto your SD card, and then I'll show you how to actually flash the backpack module to it before we take care of all the things for our radio that we're going to need to do. But first, let's get an SD card in our goggles and start formatting it. And now that the goggles are powered up, we can scroll down to record options. We can enter that menu with the middle button, and then we can scroll all the way down to format SD card. We'll want to click that. It's going to warn us, as it rightfully should, because you don't want to accidentally delete things. Just remember that when you do this, all of your DVR files that you had on here and any other firmware you had for VTXs will be gone. So get it off there if you don't want to delete it all, but if you do, just go ahead and click the middle button again. And when we do that, it will start the formatting process, which will go on for a minute or so, especially if you have a larger card. But when it's done, just go ahead and unplug your goggles, and then take your happy little SD card out of your goggles, put it in something you can read the SD card with, like I have here, or whatever works with your computer, plug that into your computer, and then don't forget where you put the zip file from earlier, because we're about to use that bad boy to get the ELRS backpack flashed on this ESP32 chip in these super awesome HDZero goggles. And with the SD card open on the computer, you can see all we have in here is a folder called Movies. But we need to make a new folder for this. So we're going to make a new folder, and we're going to name it ELRS, all uppercase. We're going to go into that ELRS folder, and then we're going to go dig up our zip file from earlier. And here's my zip file. So I'm going to open that up. I'm going to go into this folder called ELRS. I'm going to highlight all of these things, and I'm going to drag them into this ELRS folder inside the SD card. Then I'm going to go ahead and close the zip file, close the SD card, and then I'm going to make sure to eject the SD card properly before removing it from my PC. Now we'll just insert the SD card back into our goggles, power them up, and I will show you how to go flash the ESP32 for use with the ELRS backpack. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is go down to connections, and we want to make sure the backpack's actually turned on. If yours is off, go ahead and click it to on. Then we're going to go down to the bottom and hit back. And then we're going to go down to firmware, and we're going to go down to update ESP32. You'll notice mine says version HDZero goggles. We're going to go ahead and click that, and then it's going to start doing the firmware update. And mine says that because I've already flashed it. Yours probably won't say anything at all, but when it's done, yours will say that. This is going to take a few minutes, and then it's going to finish up, and it's just going to dump us back in the screen. We don't have to reboot the goggles or anything funny like that. It's just going to show us a version number there where it didn't before to acknowledge that it exists, I suppose. Yeah, and so just wait on this. And there we go. It's back to just normal, and now it says version HDZero goggle, like mine did before. But yeah, it's not time to connect it to your radio yet. You still got a backpack in your radio that needs flashing, so let's power these goggles off, and then let's head over to ExpressLRS configurator so we can actually build the backpack firmware that goes in your module or your internal module, or whatever it may be that you have this running ExpressLRS that has the extra ESP32 chip for a backpack. Whatever it is, as long as it was compatible, like I said at the beginning, because this is not the time where you want to get to it and you realize you don't have the chip, because then you'll just be real disappointed. So make sure you have checked that previously. Like I said, either with your manufacturer's spec, or if I was able to find a sheet, the link in the description below to what that is. And now that we're in ExpressLRS configurator, you can see I'm running version 1.5.5. And that's because that's the newest version of ELRS configurator. If you don't have ELRS configurator, I'm wondering why you're running ELRS on your radio. But maybe you've never flashed it before. We'll just go with whatever. I'm not going to judge you. There's a link in the description below if you need a link to download the configurator. But we're going to go into the backpack section of this configurator because it has what we need to get this done. So over here in the backpack section, we're going to want to stick with version 1.2.0 because it is the newest and the firmware we just flashed will work with it. As far as the target goes, yeah, you notice we don't have any goggles and we've already flashed the VRX. Now we need to flash the TX. So this will be the transmitter module. And we're going to go ahead and pick our device. You can see there's a whole list of things in here. For me, I have the Radio Master Ranger. Just make sure you get the one that is made for your radio that's compatible with Backpack. I'm going to go ahead and click Ranger for mine, and I'm going to click Wi-Fi because we will be doing a Wi-Fi flash for this one because that's the easiest way. And if you saw my easiest way to flash ELRS video, you'll notice I did all that on Wi-Fi too. So you're going to need a Wi-Fi compatible device, whether it be your computer or your cell phone, to connect it to your radio when we get to the point here in a minute where we flash the backpack. That way you can get the firmware over to it. But we're going to pick that method for now. And in the settings that popped up when we switched to Wi-Fi, you'll probably want to go ahead and set a binding phrase. And I recommend that you set the same binding phrase that you did on your actual radio link. This will not accidentally link to your quad as the radio control link. It's a whole separate deal here. It's basically just a little Wi-Fi network between the goggles and your radio. But it's easiest if you just use the same binding phrase for that you did for the other one. And optionally, you can add your home network if you really want to. And if you do, put it in there. It'll be the same thing where if you go to look for it later on, if you added the home network thing, it's not going to just broadcast its own Wi-Fi because it doesn't do that anymore. It'll connect to your home network and show up totally differently. But whatevs. Yeah, it's fine. Go ahead and do that if you want to do that, but if not, it's fine too. And once we have all that settled, we're just going to go ahead and click Build, let it do its thing. And once it gets done, it's going to pop up the folder. So we're going to want to right-click and copy this, whatever your file name is, bin file, and then we're going to go put it somewhere for safekeeping. For me, I have a whole folder of ExpressLRS firmware, and I have backpack firmware inside of that folder, and then I have each of my backpacks. I'm just going to go ahead and paste it in here for safekeeping. And now that we have the firmware, it's time to actually do the work on the radio. So let's take a look at how we start up the backpack flashing functions on the radio and get connected to it. So in the radio, we're going to want to go to our ExpressLRS Lua script, no big deal there, and we're going to want to go down to Wi-Fi connectivity and enable the backpack Wi-Fi. And over at our computer, we're going to go to the Wi-Fi networks and look for a network called ExpressLRS TX Backpack. We're going to click that, we're going to hit connect, and we're going to get connected up to it. Now, if you don't have a laptop with Wi-Fi or desktop with Wi-Fi, totally fine. You can take that bin file that we made earlier, drop it on something like Google Drive or iCloud or whatever you have that can get it over to your cell phone, and then use your cell phone to find this wireless network and get connected to it. Now, if for some reason this wireless network prompts you for a password, which mine did not, but it could be because I have some kind of cached credential, the password will be ExpressLRS, all lowercase. And whenever you get connected to it, it will pop up a web page where we're going to be doing the flashing. And this is what that web page looks like. You can see it went to 10.0.0.1, which is the default address that ExpressLRS uses, and straight to the firmware backpack stuff. So we're going to choose file here, and we're going to look for the file that we made, the bin file. And again, if you're doing this on your phone, same thing, just click it and have downloaded that file from your iCloud or your OneDrive or your Google Drive or your anything, I don't care what it is, whatever got it to your phone. Whatever it's from, get it on your phone's internal storage because you want to be able to pick it in this web page. But since we're using PC, I'm just going to pick it out of this file list. And once I have that picked, I'm just going to click the update button. We're going to see it upload, and then we're going to watch it flash, and it really doesn't take very long at all. And that's it. We have update succeeded. We are good to go. Click OK, and you are done. And after you get that success message, you'll probably notice that you're no longer connected to the Wi-Fi for the backpack. That's totally normal because it actually turns the Wi-Fi off. The ESP32 chip reboots. So it's perfectly normal that you get disconnected from that Wi-Fi network. It's all good. You don't need it anymore anyway. Now it's time to actually connect the radio and the goggles together to get this working. And if you're one of those smart T viewers out there that doesn't have their brain full of grease like mine is, you probably remember that we talked about using a binding phrase. We made the firmware for the radio. And yes, we did use a binding phrase, or at least I did, and I hope you did too, because it makes your life way easier. That binding phrase will work for any other backpack receiver out there. Basically, any of them at all. If you flash them with a binding phrase, it'll connect right up and we don't have to bind anything. But in this instance, we do have to bind it. Because, like I said at the very beginning of this video, the ExpressLRS configurator doesn't currently list the HDZero goggles as an option for making firmware, so we don't have any way to, put the binding phrase in. So we've got to bind it manually, which is not really that big a deal. Let's just get that done real quick. I'll show you what it looks like. So with the goggles on, we're going to go ahead and go down to Connections, and we're going to go to Start Backpack Binding. And you'll notice mine already has a UID there, because mine's already bound, because I didn't actually use mental telepathy at the beginning. I've already done this, and I've already bound it to my radio one time so that I could get this to work and show you how it works. But if you want to just believe that with mental telepathy, I'm totally down with that, because I want it. I want the telepathy. That's what I want. I want the telepathy. Anyway, that's why I have a UID and you don't. It's perfectly fine. We're just going to go ahead and click that anyway. So we click Start Backpack Binding and it goes into binding mode. And then over on our radio in the ExpressLRS Lua script, we're going to go all the way down to the bottom and we're going to click Bind. And over on the goggles, we see success, and now you will see a UID. That UID may not show up immediately, but it will show up if you back out and go back in. Sometimes it takes a few seconds. It's all good. Now you got these things paired up. But what can you actually do with it? What can you actually do with these things paired together like this? Well, you can change the band and channel, like I showed you earlier. But let me show you actually how to do that in the ExpressLRS Lua script, in case you don't know. And the way to do it is go to VTX admin here in the script, and you can pick a band R is for race band, F is for fat shark, all the things most people stick in race band. You can pick a channel. I'm on 1 right now, but maybe I want to go to 8. You can pick a power level, which you just see as numbers there. And I don't really use that one because it is kind of confusing. It doesn't tell you how many milliwatts it's outputting. It tells you the number of the channel in the VTX table, not channel, the number of the setting in the VTX table that you want to set it to. So you have to remember, what is my first one set to in my VTX table? Is it 25 milliwatts or 0? Is my second one 25 or 100? You may not know, and it's super confusing, and there's no way for the ELRS Lua script to know what is in the Betaflight configuration, so it just shows up as numbers here. I just leave that alone and let low power disarm manage all of my output power, and if I want to change the output power, I'll do it with stick commands instead of this. That's just easier for me. And you can also put it in pit mode if you want to with this on-off selector. But once you have it all done, just go down to Send VTX and click the button. And now your quad will change channel on its VTX, and your goggles, even if they're in the menu or anything else, will change to what you just told them to change to. So the goggles will follow the quad when it comes to whatever you just told it to do. But there's actually some other cool stuff you can do too with this same function having to do with DVR recording. Let me go show you that. And that is back here in the ELRS Lua script under the backpack section. You can see we have DVR rec, DVR start delay, and DVR stop. And if we click DVR rec, you can see I can select a switch here. And what that actually does is start and stop my DVR recording on my goggles with a switch. And that's kind of cool because HDZero in the olden days used to record all of its files in a format called TS, which was fairly resilient to if you accidentally unplug the goggles, not corrupting the file. But now they have the option of MP4, which is really nice for editing because a lot of things will play MP4 files. But the problem with MP4 is that it's this ongoing encoding, and if you unplug things, the whole flight is totally screwed. The whole file is screwed if you just unplug the goggles. But what you can do is set the same arm switch or aux1 high to be your camera or DVR switch. And as soon as you arm, it will arm. And there's start and stop delays you can set in here. So you can arm and start the DVR instantly. And if you disarm for some reason, like a crash, or you just do something totally stupid, or you want to just feel what disarming feels like to flop into the ground and break a bunch of stuff, whatever you do, that's up to you. You can set like a 30-second or so, or 10-second, or whatever you want it to be, delay on the turning the DVR off. So you get to capture that breakage in all of its glory in your DVR, which is kind of nice because you don't have to worry about the file being corrupted by you unplugging your goggles in a fit of rage to go pick up your quad. You just click this. When you disarm, 10 seconds later, the file will cut itself off properly. You can disconnect your goggles and you're good without pressing any buttons. It's pretty darn awesome. And that's it. That's all you need to know to impress your friends and colleagues with mental telepathy. That's not really mental telepathy. All you do is concentrate and click a button on your radio, and it will do things that are pretty cool that other radio links can't do and other goggles can't do natively. If you'll notice in the goggle section that we saw earlier in the ExpressLRS configurator, the only other goggle listed is the Orca goggles, and that's not even built into the Orca goggles. That is an add-on component to the Orca goggles. These are the only ones so far that have it completely built in. Now, if you're looking to do this process on something else, like the HDZero VRX or a rapid-fire analog module, totally doable, but you have to add something to it. It doesn't come baked in like it does with the HDZero goggles. And that's what makes one of the things, there are a lot of things, that make these goggles super special in the FPV market. And if this has been helpful, throw me a thumbs up. I appreciate you watching the video, and I hope that you enjoy your time with the ELRS backpack in your HDZero goggles if you're not still in the closet crying in the fetal position because they haven't shown up yet. And if you are, well, at least you know how to do it now when they finally do show up, and you won't have to wait as long. Just remember, you can go ahead and flash your radio's backpack, and you can get smart audio or MSP VTX control running on your quad. And all you have to do is dump the files on your SD card like I showed you into the goggles, get it bound up, and you are golden and good to go. And all that time spent in the fetal position crying in your closet won't be for naught, because you're going to have a super freaking pair of awesome goggles on your face and a lot of cool features if you're running ExpressLRS. But anyway, that's all I got for you. If you haven't, Please subscribe to the channel so you can see future things, maybe even about the HDZero goggles, and a bunch about ExpressLRS, because there's new things coming all the time, and I'm definitely going to be covering those. And if you want to ask more questions, head over to the Bacon Corner Discord, where we always have discussions about stupid things. Please save us from the stupid thing discussions and bring something legitimate, like a question about the HDZero Goggle backpack module, because we need to get some actual things done over there instead of just sending each other memes all day. Because that does happen. There's actually a whole channel on that Discord for memes. It's pretty great, actually. I really enjoy it. Anyway, that's all I got. Until next time, stay greasy. And I'll catch you later. This really makes me wonder what the world would be like if we really did have mental telepathy capabilities. Like, how many things would I just not get out of my chair for anymore? I want to turn some lights off, just touch my temple, think about it, and it happens. That'd be awesome. But what else? What else would it be? What else would I do? Could I summon more toilet paper in the bathroom when I'm out? Like, just would the concentration of already being in the bathroom be good enough if I was just touching my temple? Just touching it. Would the toilet paper start floating toward me? My mind's a scary place.